Now let's talk a little bit about dedicated denial of service attacks and botnets and that kind of threat. A lot of publicity around that, but how concerned should we be, and what can level 3, for example, do to prevent that happening?
So denial of service attacks are sort of the bane of existence of internet service providers in general, right? It represents the sort of the most refined example of the type of attack that can tear down the infrastructure of an internet service provider. You combine that with the power of Internet of Things, and now we've got one of the largest sort of threat landscapes from an attack perspective on the planet. The advent of IoT botnets like Mariah. The reason why bad guys are starting to favor IoT devices, and especially for things like DOS attacks, is for the really simple truth that IoT is sort of starting from scratch from a cybersecurity perspective. They really have not learned the lessons from all the other cybersecurity ecosystems that exist. So there's no anti-malware protection on IoT devices. There's no log correlation and analysis for IoT devices. And they're all built the same way. So if I have a bunch of consumers who have desktops and I'm a bad guy who wants to break into those, I have to contend with people who have modified those devices in some slight way that could defeat my ability to compromise that device and take it over. IoT, they're all configured exactly the same way. So you break into one IoT vendor, you now have access to that entire platform. So we've seen pretty significant not only advances in IoT botnets, because the bad guys now have, on average, the bad guy has about 4 months of life on a compromised machine when he's either doing a campaign or a DOS campaign or a spamming campaign. On IoT, we've seen that to be a year to a year and a half. So the amount of investment on getting access to more IoT devices is astounding. We've also seen IoT devices, we've seen 1.4, 1.5 million node botnets using IoT, whereas only 50,000 of those devices are actually being used to bring down pretty large pieces of infrastructure, like dying DNS as an example, was a huge wake-up call for the industry. So it's changed the way that internet service providers are monitoring their backbone. It's changed the way internet service providers are having to invest in keeping an eye on IoT devices. We can't block millions of devices. We can only block, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of devices at once. And so being able to keep an eye on those platforms, keep an eye on who the actors are, and be able to dynamically block those botnets is a huge challenge for internet service providers.